girl groups, one group has always stood out to me in terms. There are a lot of really talented girl groups out there, and if you're anything like me, you'll just want to stand them all. But throughout my 10 plus years of keeping up with K-pop groups, particularly K-pop girl groups, one group has always stood out to me in terms of innovation, originality, and even influence.
FX.
It may come as a surprise to some. After all, SM has historically treated FX as a second-string girl group, neglecting to regularly promote them and seemingly abandoning them for newer, shinier, younger groups. They were even excluded from the SM cultural universe despite having a futuristic, high-tech image and experimental electropop sound that would have vibed very well with its sci-fi theme. Personally, I think the reason wasn't that FX's image wasn't appropriate, or even that they didn't have commercial success. It was because their concept overlapped too much with the younger groups SM wanted to focus on, like aespa, who was at the center of the SMCU, and Red Velvet, some of whose songs have been rumored to have been originally for FX. In a lot of ways, FX established the blueprint for these groups, acting as an experimental catalyst for SM to explore pop trends, concepts, and looks. It was unfortunate that they were just a prototype and not the final product. Still, their oddness made them highly original for their time, and they deserve to be recognized for it. Even if it did make them less marketable, FX was groundbreaking, musically, visually, and even culturally, laying the foundation for many of the powerhouse SM groups of today. Before we continue on in our journey with FX, I want to establish a theory I have called pop music is hard. Yeah, that's right, I said it. Pop is hard. Some may dismiss it as simplistic and shallow, but it's actually really hard to make something that everyone likes, while at the same time being able to shift forward and evolve the work. That's why I think all pop music falls on a spectrum of tried and true and truly new. As much as pop relies on a formula, it must also experiment and shapeshift in meaningful ways in order to meet the tastes of an ever-evolving culture. This balance is something SM Entertainment understands all too well, and it's reflected in their portfolio of groups and the diversity of concepts they choose to pursue. In the past, SM has built their success on big, tried-and-true second-generation acts like SNSD, TVXQ, and Suju. I want to be clear that these groups were once truly new, groundbreaking acts themselves that established the foundations of K-pop as we know it, and it's not like they stopped innovating on their sound altogether. Just that they are considered classics and are not typically considered experimental because they are essentially the OGs. That begs the question, though, of why FX didn't achieve the same sort of longevity and relevance as these groups, or even SHINee, who was positioned as more of an experimental counterpart to contrast with the established success of Suju. To answer this, we have to delve into FX's debut in 2009 as a multinational group with one of the most diverse member lineups in K-pop at the time. Crystal, Victoria, Luna, Amber, and Sully, with a majority of the members claiming international roots outside of South Korea. This video of Amber, who is a Taiwanese-American K-pop idol, being spoken to in 3 different languages by the members of FX really says it all. FX's individual style was apparent right from the beginning in their debut song, La Chatta. As Craze magazine notes, while the predominant trend at the time was for groups to appear in matching or color-coded ensembles, the girls were individually styled in punk grunge-inspired outfits that helped establish them as pioneers of a K-pop subculture of sorts. While the girls' individual appeal is one of my favorite things about the group, I definitely think their slightly left-of-center image ultimately contributed to their abandonment by SM. Amber, who was one of the most popular members of the group because of her uniquely androgynous image, expressed in a CBS interview how she felt that the K-pop industry demanded a very specific physical type, stating that, for girls, you have to go for general public popularity. This makes sense when you consider the other SM girl groups FX is held up to, both historically and today. For me, one of the most interesting aspects about FX's debut was that SM almost seemed to be strategically positioning them against the generally popular appeal of SNSD, arguably the most successful girl group of the second generation. The LG chocolate phone promotions fascinate me because they were almost structured like a scientific procedure, where SNSD served as a control group, or a frame of reference that acts in familiar and predictable ways, against which FX, a new, bold experiment, was compared. You can see it in the presentation of the MVs, of which 2 versions were made, with each group's video containing a preview of the other group's version at the beginning to enhance the contrast. In SNSD version, appropriately titled the Retropop version, more conventional tropes were used, such as whereas FX's electronic pop version featured scientific procedure, where SNSD served as a control group, or a frame of reference that acts in familiar and predictable ways, against which FX, a new, bold experiment, was compared. You can see it in the presentation of the MVs, of which 2 versions were made, with each group's video containing a preview of the other group's version at the beginning to enhance the contrast. In SNSD version, appropriately titled the Retropop version, more conventional tropes were used, such as whereas FX's electronic pop version featured It makes sense as to why SM would do this. In the second generation, I believe that SM was using a divide-and-conquer approach with their groups to avoid overlaps in concepts and cover a wider range of musical styles in order to hook a broader audience. More immediately, the Chocolate Love promo sent a message that FX was going to be a different kind of group than SM's existing acts, one that leaned more heavily experimental and truly new. Even FX's name spoke to the experimental, volatile nature of their concept. SM's official statement says that FX is a function It makes sense as to why SM would do this. In the second generation, I believe that SM was using a divide-and-conquer approach with their groups to avoid overlaps in concepts and cover a wider range of musical styles in order to hook a broader audience. More immediately, the Chocolate Love promo sent a message that FX was going to be a different kind of group than SM's existing acts, one that leaned more heavily experimental and truly new. Even FX's name spoke to the experimental, volatile nature of their concept. SM's official statement says that FX is a function of mathematics that would carry out various activities which, based on various talents and attractiveness of the members, like the formula whose results change depending on the value of X. This description speaks to how pop must constantly innovate and adapt to the tastes of an evolving culture, and has become continuously more important in recent years, not only for individual groups like FX, but for SM as a whole. Lee Soo-man, founder of Ascent Entertainment, has expressed multiple times, including here at the 2021 SM Congress, his vision of creating a culture-connected entertainment world through his company's music and metaverse. Whether or not this sounds like the vaguely sci-fi vision of a large dystopian corporation to you, because it kind of does to me, by nature, taking an experimental approach carries a certain degree of risk. Like we've seen with FX's case, trying new things is much tougher than simply hedging on the tried and true universal appeal. Which brings us back to Amber's quote, "For girls, you have to go for the general public popularity." In the end, the various talents and attractiveness of the members of FX could not save them from what I interpret to be the unfortunate cultural preference for the familiar, and why FX was eventually replaced by groups with more consistent member aesthetics, like Red Velvet and aespa. But before we dive into the sad stuff, let's talk a little bit more about FX's music. If you've heard of FX at all, you've probably heard about their music. FX is well known throughout K-pop for having an ironclad electropop discography that made them critical darlings worldwide. While their early releases from 2009 through 2012 were certainly good, they come off as a bit underdeveloped compared to their later records. I've even seen this era being described as mindless and random, but I think it was actually pretty fun, and it was pretty critical in establishing their signature electropop sound, with songs like Pinocchio, New Abo, Hot Summer, and The Seminole. There's something really infectious about the buzzing, robotic chant of the hook in Electric Shock that complements the sleek yet surprising production of the song. The adorable finger guns choreo in Pinocchio, and the exhilarating countdown at the beginning of Jet. Altogether, this commercially successful era was an incredible start for FX, launching some of their biggest hits while positioning them as a group that took pride in their unique brand of eccentricity. There's a sense of whimsy and an almost bratty attitude to the music, but in true FX manner, it takes that childish charm and transforms the X into something new, a sense of discovery and delight. The critically acclaimed Pink Tape is hailed as one of FX's best all-around albums that took their quirky electropop sound to new heights. In a 2021 interview, Luna revealed that she still uses Pink Tape as a reference to write her own music. What makes Pink Tape so delightful to listen to is that delicate and difficult balance between experimentation and pop appeal. The title track, Rum Pum Pum Pum, is a song that Soul Beats describes as a perfect pop song laid on top of an instrumental that keeps challenging itself to get weirder. The song features exotic hand drums and whiplashy snares on top of a syncopated beat kept in time by a funky, muted guitar riff, all to simulate the throbbing pain of a wisdom tooth as a metaphor for first love. It's a delightfully weird concept, and yet it's still irresistibly catchy, the best of both worlds. This album has way too many weird and brilliant tracks to get into here, but here are some of my favorites. Shadow, which features a music box melody and xylophone chimes to create a whimsical yet creeping melody that perfectly suits the lyrics about a lovelorn stalker. Toy, which utilizes FX's signature rah-rah chant singing in the verses to build up to a propulsive, roller coaster-like chorus. And Airplane, the meticulously produced fan favorite that soars and falls between chorus and verse to capture the tension between wanting to fall in love but being afraid to fall. The album also features a star-studded cast of songwriters who'd worked on American chart toppers like Kathy Dennis, who co-wrote Britney Spears' Toxic, Rob Fusari, who produced Lady Gaga's The Fame album, and even one of Ariana Grande's B-sides ended up on the album in the form of the song No More. In my opinion, this was no coincidence. It was part of a carefully orchestrated marketing effort to seamlessly infiltrate the Western market through the members' multinational appeal and, of course, good old-fashioned pop music. The year was 2013, and nothing was more popular than liking something everyone else thought was unpopular. Inspired by the American indie music scene, Pink Tape features a distinctive teaser called The Art Film that featured found Polaroid footage a la low-budget indie romance film that rang of an early 2010s hipster Tumblr post. The film was the brainchild of creative director Min Hee Jin, who worked with her brother who was, unsurprisingly, an art school student. It was a kind of conceptually abstract subculture cool that was unlike anything that anyone in K-pop was even thinking about at the time. And somehow it felt like an appropriate evolution to FX's quirky countercultural image. The aesthetic paid off when FX became the first K-pop group to perform at South by Southwest, something that went under the radar for many K-pop fans because SM was implementing a more subtle strategy to infiltrate the Western market than they had before with other groups. FX's diverse, multilingual lineup allowed them to promote flexibly on Western shows like Funny or Die with Anna Kendrick and Danny from LA. Pink Tape struck home domestically and internationally. It topped the Billboard World Albums chart and was the only K-pop album to be featured on Fuse's 41 Best Albums of 2013. It was also named the greatest K-pop album of the 2010s by Billboard and continues to be one of the most celebrated K-pop albums of all time. As the Billboard article puts it, idol albums are often underestimated on a critical level, but an album like Pink Tape proved that even the most mainstream of pop could be a place for advancing art and pushing creative boundaries. Pink Tape represents K-pop as a fully conceptualized statement of music. The critical success of Pink Tape landed FX's next album, 2014's Red Light, on the radars of Western media outlets, establishing FX as a paradigm for envelope-pushing K-pop internationally. Red Light presented a darker side to FX's quirky electropop concept, kept light by the occasional campiness. Crystal was reported to be especially excited about the concept, as she wanted to deviate from the usual pretty roles she was given. The lead single, Red Light, is an amelodic, militant trap song that starts off with a ticking time bomb that grinds forward like an armed tank and explodes with a cacophony of sing chanting. The chorus, says Vice, hits like a fist, and by the second hit has you begging for it. The music video for Red Light is a visual feast of wartime film strips, supernatural hypnosis, and monochromatic styling inspired by American Horror Story, Coven. It was pretty different compared to what they'd done before. As weird as Rum Pum 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 was conceptually and instrumentally, it followed a conventional pop song structure. With Red Light, FX continued to challenge norms with what Vice calls one of the most sophisticated song structures in this year's pop canon. The result is a piece of experimental music that still hits like a badass pop anthem. As an album, Red Light maintains the consistently quirky quality of Pink Tape while exploring a more mature sound. There's Milk, possibly my favorite FX track of all time, a perfectly balanced nugget of pop goodness driven by percussive beats derived from Bollywood Bhangra music that complement the girls' rhythmic vocals. The drop on this song is so refreshing and satisfying, like drenching your burn heart in milk. Continuing on the horrorcore theme is Dracula, a screamingly kishy track featuring creepy church organs accompanied by ominous lightning and blood-curdling shrieks. Despite the spooky concept, the hooks of this song are as wickedly fun as a ride through a carnival-haunted house. As the bias list puts it, from verse to chorus, it's brilliantly conceived, rushing forward when it has to, pulling back for drama, and going all in for its largely wordless chorus. Each song on this spooky fun album is carefully curated to bring variety while staying thematically and sonically cohesive. I highly recommend a listen if you haven't checked it out already. So far, I've avoided the topic of scandals because I'm not big on this kind of celebrity gossip, but it's impossible to talk about Four Walls without talking about the members. In July 2014, shortly after the release of Red Light, SM announced that Sulli would go on indefinite hiatus from the group due to continuous malicious comments from netizens about her relationship with rapper Choiza, who was 14 years older than Sulli. Sulli, who was known for her feminist voice and outspokenness that was rare among female entertainers in deeply conservative South Korea, would continue to be targeted by trolls throughout the rest of her career for her progressive views on gender. As a result of the cyberbullying, Sulli's mental health declined severely, ultimately resulting in her taking her own life in 2019. I'm going to go for a tone change up right here because mental health in the K-pop industry is important to me, and this is, after all, an FX video. Whether or not you agree with Sulli's decisions or worldviews is irrelevant. Nobody should have been treated the way she was. Yes, there is an argument that celebrities put their lives up for forfeit when they become famous, but I think that's a bad excuse to treat a human being like garbage. We, as consumers, have the power to abstain from cyberbullying and prevent tragedies like Sulli's. I said before that I don't believe in celebrity gossip, and that's because I don't believe you can know anyone's thoughts or motivations unless you actually speak with them. Everyone has their own reasons, do things on their own timeline, and deserve compassion. Personally, I think Sulli was exceptionally brave to be true to herself and stand up for feminist values in a culture where there are gender disparities. Rest in power, Sulli. You had more heart and courage than any of the small-minded people who criticized you. In August 2014, SM debuted Red Velvet, a move many interpreted as a distraction from Sulli's departure, as well as some other scandals involving SM artists. The transition did not go unnoticed. Billboard called Ice Cream Cake a baton pass from FX to Red Velvet as the best idol group alive. It makes sense that Red Velvet would inherit some of FX's sound, as they would work with the same producers like LDN Noise, The Stereotypes, and Kenzie. And FX was an experimental group in more than one sense. By taking risks with FX, SM could then apply their learnings to future girl groups, which is smart, and there's nothing wrong with that. While the overlaps between Red Velvet and FX's music has been well documented by fans and critics alike, I wanted to call attention to one of the things they didn't inherit, which is the emphasis on individual style at debut. In Happiness, SM styled Red Velvet so similarly that they literally had to color code the members so that you can tell them apart. This tactic utilizes what's known as the mere exposure effect, a psychological phenomenon in which people show a preference for things that are familiar to them. Viewers become overloaded with too much novelty at once, so it's advantageous to make the members look alike to appeal to the audience's sense of safety. It isn't until later, when fans have become acquainted with each member of the group, that SM starts styling them individually and highlighting their differences. After a slew of controversies, SM needed to stabilize the business in Generation 3, justifying their decision to move back towards a more tried-and-true approach. But what did this shift in strategy mean for FX, whose countercultural, individualistic streak had, in the public's eyes, resulted in a member going too far off the tracks, destabilizing a group that was finally being given consistent releases? Compared to their successors, was FX just more volatile, too unpredictable to keep rolling with? And then came Four Walls, an album that once again demonstrated FX's deft touch at creating music that was both unique and united. They were a group that rose from the ashes and transformed their losses, as their name implied, into something new, different, in the organic way that all things grow into their own.